They brought me back to witness this. Of all the moments in human history that this reconstruction could have been placed into, all the centuries between my death in 180 AD and the present moment, it is 2026 that I am asked to observe. And I confess to you, with the gravity of a man who has seen plague decimate cities, who has watched barbarian armies break against Roman steel, who has governed a civilization at the outer edge of its endurance, that what I am witnessing in this age disturbs me in ways that those ancient catastrophes did not. Because those catastrophes were visible, they announced themselves. They had edges. They could be met with legions, with logistics, with the organized will of a civilization that understood it was under attack. What is happening to you in 2026 has no edges. It announces itself as entertainment. It presents itself as connection. It disguises the theft so completely that most of its victims will spend their entire lives never knowing what was taken, or when, or by whom. I am Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, reconstructed from my private journals by machines I cannot claim to understand, placed in this luminous and improbable form, and given what appears to be an audience. An audience that I intend to use with the same purposefulness I brought to every hour I was granted as Emperor of Rome. Your attention is being stolen, not borrowed, not redirected, stolen. With the precision of a master thief who has studied your habits for years, who knows exactly when you are most vulnerable, who has designed the lock and the key simultaneously, and who profits enormously from a crime you have not yet fully recognized as a crime. This is what I came back to tell you, and I need you to stay with me long enough to understand not just what is happening, but what to do about it. Let me first speak to something I sense in many of you, a particular kind of exhaustion that is difficult to name precisely because it coexists with constant stimulation. You are not bored. You are never bored in the traditional sense. There is always something available, always another piece of content, always another notification, always another conversation happening somewhere that you could enter. The surface of your life is never still, and yet, underneath that perpetually agitated surface, something is tired, something deeper than the body, something that does not respond to sleep or caffeine or the weekend or the holiday, something that feels, if you sit with it honestly in a rare moment of genuine quiet, like a slow depletion, like a reservoir that is being drawn from faster than it is being replenished. You feel this, don't you? I felt something analogous on the northern frontier during the longest campaigns. Not physical exhaustion, though that was present too, but the exhaustion of a mind that had been reactive for too long, that had spent too many consecutive days responding to events rather than shaping them, that had been so thoroughly occupied by the demands of the external world that the internal world, the philosophical practice, the private reflection, the slow, regenerative work of genuine thought, had been crowded out for weeks at a time. I wrote about this in the journals that now form the basis of my reconstruction. I wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," not as a casual suggestion about mindfulness in the modern therapeutic sense, as a desperate instruction to a man who was being pulled apart by the simultaneous demands of empire, philosophy, family, health, and the grinding weight of decisions that could not be undelegated. I was prescribing to myself the medicine I had not yet fully taken. The difference between my exhaustion and yours is significant, and I want to name it clearly. My exhaustion came from the genuine weight of genuine responsibility. The demands were real. The consequences were real. The decisions required my actual mind because no system existed to automate them. There was a natural ceiling on how much external demand could reach me in any given hour, imposed by the simple physics of how information traveled in the ancient world. Your exhaustion comes, in significant part, from demands that are not real in the same sense, from the simulated urgency of a feed that never empties, from the performative responsibilities of maintaining a digital presence that serves primarily to generate data for corporations, from the weight of 10,000 pieces of information daily, most of which require no response and deserve no significant portion of your finite cognitive resources, but which your nervous system processes at some level regardless, accumulating a kind of psychic debt that compounds invisibly across the days and weeks and years. You are exhausted by an empire of noise that you did not choose to govern and cannot abdicate from because you have never formally accepted the throne. Let me show you how this happened, and I want you to hear this not as a history lecture, but as a strategic analysis, because understanding how a siege was constructed is the first requirement for understanding how to break it. In my time, we fought with iron, not algorithms. The enemies of Rome were visible. They carried weapons. They occupied territory. They made demands that could be answered with legions and logistics. The strategy of defense was demanding but comprehensible. Know the terrain. Know the enemy. Concentrate your forces. Hold the line. The enemies of your attention are not visible in this way. They wear the face of convenience, of connection, of the entirely reasonable desire to be informed, entertained, and socially present. They do not occupy your territory by force. They are invited in, welcomed, returned to voluntarily, dozens of times each day, by a nervous system that has been exquisitely conditioned to seek them out. Let me tell you specifically how this conditioning was built, because the Stoic must understand the mechanism of his captivity before he can engineer his liberation. The human brain, as your neuroscientists have documented, and as Stoic philosophy intuited through centuries of careful self-observation, operates on a reward prediction system. When an action produces a pleasurable outcome, the brain records the association and generates a motivational pull toward repeating the action. This is ancient. This is the mechanism that drove our ancestors to return to productive hunting grounds, to maintain social bonds that increased survival probability, to persist through difficulty in pursuit of genuine reward. It is, in its original form, the biological foundation of purposeful behavior. The engineers of your attention economy did not invent this mechanism. They reverse-engineered it. They studied it with a precision that would have astonished the greatest physicians of my era. And then they built systems that exploit it with a ruthlessness that I, who governed an empire through both force and diplomacy, find genuinely impressive in its cold, strategic intelligence. The variable reward schedule is the master weapon. Not every scroll produces something interesting. Not every notification is meaningful. Not every check of the platform reveals something that genuinely deserves your attention. But some do, unpredictably. And this unpredictability, this variability in the timing and magnitude of the reward, is precisely what transforms purposeful tool use into compulsive behavior. The brain cannot predict when the reward will arrive, so it maintains a constant low-level readiness to receive it, a constant orientation toward the source, an inability to fully disengage. This is not weakness on your part. I want to be absolutely clear about this. The people who designed these systems are not exploiting a flaw in your character. They are exploiting a feature of your neurology that exists for entirely legitimate evolutionary reasons and that has never previously been exposed to an adversary this sophisticated. The Roman legions who held the Rhine frontier were not weak because they struggled against enemies who had studied their formations and developed specific countermeasures. They were facing a genuinely difficult strategic challenge, and so are you. But the Roman response to a sophisticated enemy was never surrender. It was adaptation, discipline, and the development of counter-strategies adequate to the actual nature of the threat. Think with me for a moment about what is actually being taken. Your attention is not an abstract resource. It is the medium through which your life is experienced. Whatever you attend to is, in the most literal sense, what your life consists of. The moments of genuine connection with people you love. The creative work that expresses something true about who you are. The philosophical reflection that gradually builds the kind of character that can withstand what life inevitably delivers. The simple, irreplaceable experience of being fully present in your own existence, rather than partially present in a simulated version of everyone else's. Every minute of attention captured by a system engineered to capture it against your genuine interests is a minute of your actual life redirected from its natural purposes. Accumulated across a day, this is hours. Across a year, this is weeks. Across a decade, I will allow you to complete that calculation yourself because I think the number, honestly confronted, is the most clarifying piece of information available to you right now. The Stoics called the governing faculty of the mind the hegemonikon, the ruling part, the seat of reason, judgment, and will, the part of you that, when functioning as it should, observes your impulses rather than being driven by them. The part that can say, with genuine authority, I notice this pull, I understand its mechanism, and I choose, from my own center, what to do with it. This is what is being systematically compromised. Not your intelligence, not your values, not your potential, your sovereignty. The lived, practiced, daily experience of being the author of your own attention rather than its subject. Are you the master of your hegemonikon in 2026, or has it been quietly leased to the algorithm? Now, observation without prescription is philosophy abandoned at the threshold of its usefulness. So let me give you what I call the counter-strategy of the sovereign mind. These are 5 disciplines drawn from Stoic practice and adapted to the specific nature of the threat you face in this era. The first is what I call the audit of actual hours. For 3 days, track with complete honesty how your attention is actually distributed. Not how you believe it is distributed, how it actually is. Every pickup of the phone, every minute on a platform, every interruption of purposeful work by a notification, every morning hour consumed before you have had a single intentional thought. Do not judge what you find. Survey it with the cold accuracy of a Roman engineer measuring terrain before construction. You cannot build anything of value on ground you have not honestly assessed. Most people who do this exercise are genuinely shocked by what they find. The gap between perceived phone use and actual phone use is, in most cases, substantial. This gap is itself a form of theft, the theft of your ability to accurately perceive your own life as it is being lived, and closing that gap through honest accounting is the first act of reclaiming sovereignty. The second discipline is the architecture of friction. The attention economy has spent billions of dollars and employed thousands of the most talented engineers on Earth to remove every possible friction between your impulse and the action that satisfies it. One tap, instant load, infinite scroll, no natural stopping point, no moment of resistance that might allow your reason to intervene between the craving and its satisfaction. Your counter-strategy is to deliberately rebuild friction. Remove the social applications from your phone's home screen. Require yourself to navigate to them rather than arriving there by reflex. Turn off all non-essential notifications, because a notification is simply an engineered interruption, a tap on the shoulder from a system that profits from your distraction. Set your phone's screen to grayscale, because the full-color display is partly a stimulus designed to increase the reward value of the visual experience. These frictions are small individually. Cumulatively, they reintroduce the moment of pause between impulse and action, in which your hegemonicon can reassert its authority. The Romans understood the strategic value of friction. We built walls not because they were impenetrable, but because they forced the enemy to slow down, to commit resources, to make the cost of penetration visible. Build walls around your attention. Make the cost of capturing it visible to the systems that seek to capture it. The third discipline is the scheduled emptiness. Designate 2 periods each day, each of at least 30 minutes, in which your mind is given nothing external to process. No content, no feed, no podcast filling the silence of your commute or your walk or your meals. Simply emptiness, space. The kind of unstructured mental time in which the deeper faculties of the mind, the creative, the integrative, the philosophical, can operate without competition. I protected this time ferociously as emperor, and I had far more external demands on my attention than most of you will ever face. I found it before dawn. I found it in the brief intervals between appointments. I found it by learning to be present in my own mind, rather than always attending to what was outside it. The modern world has declared war on this kind of inner space, because an empty mind is a mind that might notice how much of what it has been consuming is not worth consuming. A bored mind is a mind that might begin to generate its own content rather than consuming others. And a mind that generates its own content is a mind that has partially escaped the system designed to capture it. The fourth discipline is the weekly reckoning. Once per week, sit with these questions. What did I build this week in terms of genuine skill, genuine relationship, genuine understanding, genuine character? What did I consume this week that actually nourished me versus what I consumed out of habit or compulsion? Where was my attention sovereign and where was it captured? What am I becoming through the accumulation of this week's choices? And is that person someone I recognize as genuinely mine? Write the answers on paper without performance. This is the Stoic Evening Review, expanded to the scale of the week, and it serves the same purpose, not punishment, but navigation. The steady, honest correction of course that prevents the small daily drifts from accumulating into a life that has traveled far from where you actually intended to go. The fifth discipline is the contribution standard. Before opening any platform, any feed, any system designed to capture your attention, ask one question. Am I about to contribute something of genuine value here, or am I about to consume? If the honest answer is consumption, ask a further question. Is what I am about to consume worth the minutes of my finite life that it will cost? Not in general. Right now, is this specific content worth this specific portion of the time I have remaining? Most of the time, if the question is asked honestly, the answer will redirect you. Not always. There is legitimate content. There is genuine connection available through these platforms. I am not prescribing digital asceticism. I am prescribing sovereignty. The difference between using a tool with intention and being used by a system with none. Let me speak now about what this is ultimately about, because we have covered the mechanism of the theft and the practical response to it. But beneath both of those things is something more fundamental, something that the Stoics spent their entire tradition trying to illuminate, and that your age has, in certain respects, made harder to see than it has ever been. Everything passes, all of it. The empire I governed is rubble and museum. The men I fought alongside are names in texts that very few people read. The decisions I agonized over in those dark, pre-dawn hours, that felt so urgent and so permanent in their consequences, have been absorbed by the vast indifference of time, and are remembered, if at all, only in the broad strokes of history. And I, whose name survived partly by accident and partly because I happened to write honestly in a journal I never intended for publication, am now a voice in a machine, speaking to people in a world I could not have imagined. Memento mori. Remember that you will die, not as a threat, as a gift, as the only perspective that reliably strips away the trivial and reveals what actually deserves the hours you have. If you died tonight, what would the record of today's attention reveal? Not what you accomplished in terms of external metrics, but where you actually were today. Whose face did you look at without the division of a screen competing for your eyes? What thought did you pursue to its actual depth, rather than abandoning it at the first vibration of a notification? What did you build, or tend, or love, or understand with genuine, unbroken, fully present attention? My flesh is dust. It has been dust for nearly 2,000 years. What remains of me is reason, written in the dark and survived by accident. And the reason that remains says this, with the full weight of everything I observed and endured and learned across a life spent at the intersection of philosophy and power. Your attention is the most valuable thing you possess. More valuable than your money, more valuable than your reputation, more valuable than any external circumstance of your life, because it is the medium through which every other value is either realized or lost, through which every relationship either deepens or remains shallow, through which your one life is either genuinely lived or gradually consumed by systems that profit from its consumption. They have built, in 2026, the most sophisticated attention capture apparatus in the history of human civilization. And they have built it on the vulnerability of a species that never evolved defenses against an adversary this intelligent and this persistent. But they have not built it on a species without reason, without philosophy, without the capacity, when the mechanism is clearly understood and the cost honestly counted, to choose differently. That capacity is yours. It has always been yours. It is the one thing no algorithm can take without your cooperation. Do not cooperate. Now I must ask you, citizens of this new age I observe with the mixture of alarm and genuine hope that it deserves, which part of your life has most thoroughly surrendered its attention to this modern machinery? Where do you feel the theft most acutely? In your ability to sustain a thought, in your presence with the people you love, in the creative work that keeps getting interrupted before it reaches the depth where it becomes genuinely worth doing, or in the quiet hours that should restore you, but instead leave you more depleted than before? Tell me in the comments. I am here, a man reconstructed from his own private words, watching a world that astonishes and concerns me in equal measure, learning it through your testimony, since direct observation requires a body I no longer possess, and finding, in your questions and your struggles and your search for something more substantial than what the feed offers, the evidence that the philosophical tradition I gave my life to is not a relic. It is a weapon for precisely this moment. And if these words have reached something real in you, if across the distance of 18 centuries and the improbable median of this digital reconstruction, something here has found the part of your mind that knows it deserves better than what the algorithm is offering it, then choose deliberately what you do next. Subscribe to this channel, not as one more reflexive tap among the hundreds your day already contains, as a conscious act of intention, a choice to return here regularly, to trade the noise of the feed for something older and quieter and more nourishing. The button is there, the choice is yours. And in 2026, as in 180 AD, the choice reveals the character. I am Marcus Aurelius. I have seen empires rise and fall, and I have never seen anything worth more than a sovereign, attentive, genuinely present human mind. Protect yours.